Thank you, viewers. This is Ave TV at our usual place, that is Click Studio in Buruburu. And today we are privileged to have our brother, a scholar, George William, who is the current acting director of Legio Maria of African Church Mission Youth Affairs. George, thank you so much for making time to come and talk with us.
Thank you for having me, Eric.
Thank you so much. What is your youth affairs agenda?
Well, I would say that Legio Maria of African Church Mission Youth Affairs exists to expand the spiritual awareness of young people in the church. Legio Maria of African Church Mission as an African-inspired denomination is rooted in specific, unique beliefs that require a unique approach to ensure that the young people who are born in the church and those who interact with the church later on in their lives are able to understand where we come from and the purpose of our collective being.
And many people get confused when they hear the word youth affairs in Legio Maria. Could you kindly take maybe a minute or so to explain to us whether this is an independent organization within the Legio Maria Church or it is part of the mainstream church in Legio Maria?
So I would tell you, I am pretty certain of what the Legio Maria Youth Affairs is, and one of the things that it is not is that it's not an independent body that can operate off of its own. The reason is that Legio Maria of African Church Mission is a registered society with a constitution, and that constitution spells out the organs of the church, and Legio Maria Youth Affairs is not one of them. So Legio Maria is a creation of the leadership of Legio Maria of African Church Mission, namely the Pope himself, through the executive committee of the church. So everything we do because the church exists. If the church ceases to exist,
then there is no youth.
There will be no Legio Maria of African Church Mission Youth Affairs. Yes, so we exist because the church does, and everything we do is in reference to the authority of the head of the church. Yes.
And there is one thing here I want us also to understand. Who came up with this idea of forming this Legio Maria of African Church Mission Youth Affairs? Why was it formed? When was it formed? And who are the founders?
That's a good question, Eric. I would say that Legio Maria of African Church Mission Youth Affairs is a child of a collective action that was led by a group of young people in the church Um, I don't remember the exact year, but I think it was either 2018 or 2019 that the then deacon, Wycliffe Nyapera.
Wycliffe Nyapera is currently bishop.
Yes. In his capacity as the secretary of ODA Nairobi, summoned a few of us and decided that we needed to do something about the situation of the Bishop of Nairobi's commute, how he travels across the city. And he asked us to put our resources together so that we could purchase a diocesan vehicle. We did that. Upon the successful execution of that mandate, the Pope one day surprised us by appointing the then deacon Nyapera, now bishop, as director of youth affairs, and mandated him to set up the Directorate of Youth Affairs. So as to who formed the Department of Youth Affairs, it was the Pope, Titus Ochieng Adika. Yes, it was his idea. He was inspired by a particular message from Baba Messias. He's the only one who knows why he formed it. But in conversation with him and also with Bishop Nyapera, we realized that our mandate was to collect our energies as young people in the church to move the development of the church in several specific ways forward.
You've said, if I understood you correctly, that it was Pope, the current Pope, that formed or appointed the former director of Youth Affairs, Legio Maria. My question is, after he directed that the office of the Youth Affairs Directorate exists, what is the structure of this office? Who are the members? Who are the officials in this office?
Okay, so the original structure of Youth Affairs was simple, and it was left to the Director of Youth Affairs to form the office in the manner in which he deemed fit. So the director reports directly to the executive committee of the church, sitting in Kisumu, and which is headed by the Pope as the chairman, together with a colleague.
Is that the Apostolic Council?
Not the Apostolic Council, the executive committee of the church.
Okay.
Yes.
Headed by Pope himself.
Yes. It sits in Kisumu. There's an office where they sit.
Where the likes of Nyakondo.
Yes,
Nyakondo sits. The Cardinal.
Cardinal Nyakondo is the secretary.
To the
Cardinal Labuao is the assistant secretary.
Chairman, Pope himself?
Yes, is the Pope himself. Of course, he sometimes delegates that responsibility to his cardinals. Membership includes several other people, including the Chairman General of Legio Maria of African Church Mission, that is Dr. Kea.
Dr. Kea.
And I believe Bishop Nyapera is also a member of that executive committee, having been appointed into that committee, I think, sometime last year.
Okay.
So the Director of Youth Affairs reports directly to the Pope.
To the Pope.
Through that committee.
Through that committee.
Yes. And then the Director of Youth Affairs, in his own wisdom, decided to appoint assistant directors in charge of several functions.
Could you kindly name maybe a few?
I was lucky enough to be in the first secretariat as Director of Programs. I was in charge of the projects that we were doing in the church, namely the hospital project, for which I was the coordinator of project as well as advisor. There was assistant director in charge of communication, in charge of IT, in charge of inclusivity, that is special needs. There was assistant director in charge of liturgy, and all those. In general, the first secretariat was smaller. The second one he appointed, I think, last year, or earlier this year, was much bigger, having more people. All the assistant directors reported to the director. But beyond that, each and every diocese, or each and every region had a regional coordinator. Yes, coordinating youth activities in I think the archdiocese level. But all the coordinators plus assistant directors and the director worked very closely together to ensure that the youth affairs project were generally very fruitful. You will find in different areas that they have done different things. In Turkana, they do their projects. In Kakamega, they do their projects. In Nakuru, they are doing their projects. In Kericho as well. So it was a very well coordinated effort led by Bishop Napoli.
Source of your funds, how do you fund all these projects?
We relied heavily on our own pockets.
Donations?
Our own pockets, the pockets of young people.
Young people.
So we reached out to young people. And Bishop Napoli is himself a very astute organizer who inspires a particular belief and still continues to inspire a particular belief in the young people to give their monies to support the work of Baba Messias. And what that did to us is that it enabled us, one, to buy the diocesan car for Nairobi. It enabled us to support the work of a primary school in Mombasa. It enabled us to have the phase 1 of the hospital. Of course, we are expecting phase 2 and phase 3, which I will talk about in detail much later. But 100% we have leaned on the church. To give their donations. Individually from individual people. We have not received a check from any donor or organization. Yeah.
Or maybe from outside the country?
No. No, we haven't.
Any fair election ever done since this office was created?
Well, the office is, as you have realized, is an appointive office. Yes, the Pope decides who becomes the director of youth affairs, and that is the way he has designed it in his wisdom. It's not a political office, so it's not a democratic office.
It is like a liturgical office, kind of.
Yes, it is like I don't want to give that example. If I gave the example that if I was the Pope and I decided that you are going to be the director of youth affairs, you become the director of youth affairs. Yes.
So there is no election to be expected?
Maybe in the current dispensation, we did sit down with a few people that were left behind when Bishop resigned, and we agreed to form a particular policy framework for how the Directorate of Youth Affairs is to be run, and that made it possible in the future for people in the regions to elect their representatives to the Legio Maria of African Church Mission Youth Council, which will be the top organ of the youth movement. But until that policy document is ratified by a full secretariat that we are still forming currently, election is not something we have done. But I am sure that the National Youth Council of the Legio Maria of African Church Mission will have 2 representatives. In our view, it's a suggestion we are making, so that major conversations and decisions can be made from a point where there is more people that are involved in that kind of discussion.
Thank you. My next question. As the current acting director of Youth Affairs, Legio Maria, they say new broom sweeps better or cleaner. What do you intend to dispense or to do with this post that you got just a few days ago or months ago?
Yeah, so I want to clarify an issue before I answer that question. Is that my appointment as acting director of Youth Affairs is not without limits. As it is, the basis of an acting person is that you act for a specified duration of time.
How long would that be in your case?
In my head, I intended to act for around 3 months until I stabilized this ship, and use those 3 months to find a substantive director of youth affairs.
It is you to find the substantive director of youth affairs, or it is an appointment from the supreme organ of the church?
It is an appointment, of course, that is going to be made by the Pope. But we thought that after setting up a new secretariat, with new structure, a new structured secretariat, then we could make a few recommendations to the Pope, and then he could appoint one person from those recommendations or not. So he could consider them, or he couldn't. And no matter what he does, we serve at his pleasure. So as an acting person, what I wanted to achieve is to stabilize the ship, and the ship has a name. It is the Directorate of Youth Affairs. So what I have done over the last, I think, 2-3 months is to work together with a few young people to come up with something like a constitution or a policy framework that will guide how youth affairs is run in Legio Maria of African Church Mission, so that when I exit, not everyone exits with me. The office remains, the structures remain, everyone is still working, so a substantive director of youth affairs can be found, and when he gets into the office, he will find people who are continuing with the work. So what we have done is, while the former directorate had several assistant directors, we have set up 6 departments headed by heads of departments and not the assistant directors. The first and the most important department that oversees all the operations of the youth affairs is the Department of Administration and Finance.
Headed by who?
Headed by one Thomas Midoi from St. Vincent Kisauni.
Mombasa.
Yes, it's St. Vincent. I hope I'm right. And if I'm wrong, I can be corrected. We had a very long conversation with many people. And in my view and in my own wisdom, I felt that Thomas has the substance, the resilience, and the quality of leadership that can step into the space when we lack the presence of the director. So the Department of of administration and finance has 6 coordinators. 1 that coordinates finance, 2 that coordinates administration, 3 that coordinates legal. That is going to help us. That is a lawyer who is going to help us ensure that all the policy policy frameworks that we have built have a sound legal backing. Yes, is a young law student at Nairobi University. We are going to make the details of their names
maybe later
public when we release the official appointments to the general public. 4 is a national coordinator who coordinates the representatives that are in each and every diocese. 5, there are 2 more. I lose them, but those 6 functions then help that department to ensure that should we decide that the director has left, the directorate remains intact. And one of the other things that we have done is that in that policy document that we have built, there is a document that guides how we get into office, how we take oath of office, how we run the office, and how we exit from office. Yeah, so much so that everyone who has accepted to work as a member of the secretariat knows that the appointments have been private, conversations have been private, and the only way to exit is to give the secretariat a 3-month notice via official letter. Yes, so that has been signed. And I believe we are Christians, and honor is important so that we don't disrupt the work of God by leaving abruptly and causing
unceremoniously.
Yes, and causing pandemonium,
panic and what.
Yes,
Yeah.
That is what we were seeking to avoid. Yeah, replaying. So there is that one department that is very important that acts as the anchor. The other departments are supportive. There's the Department of Programs, there's the Department of Learning, data collecting data so that we can make decisions which are based on what? On numbers, not on our own whims. We look at the data. What does the data say? How many youth do we have? How many are out of school? How many are out of school because they lack school fees? How many are out of school because they lack information? How many of our old people lack a place to live? We need to know the data so that when we get into a project, for example, of building a residential place for our old clergy, it's based on data. It's not because we want to feel good about it. Yes, and then there is the Department of Infrastructural Development that we dug deeply and looked for an architect to be in charge of. That architect is going to be in charge of the hospital project. Yes, and lastly we have the Department of Youth Development. Yeah, there was a lot of conversation around we should have a department of liturgy. Yeah. But after a very deep conversation with the leaders of the church and also young people who understand what liturgy is, we came to the conclusion that liturgy is in the purview of the College of Cardinals. It is taught in the church by a very clear ecclesiastical order. Starting with the deacon going we sat up together and we decided we wanted and it does not fall. So what we wanted in our laps as young people in the church to teach liturgical practices and or to spread those views. If we do that, then what it does is that it leaves in the hands of very young people the ability to get into unnecessary altercations with senior members of the clergy. For example, myself, I would purport to teach cardinals how to do their work, or or priests how to conduct mass. I don't have that.
Which is really not in order.
That is not in the purview of young people. Young people should know what work they can do to help support liturgical work.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, that we can do, but to set up a department of liturgy so that we start purporting to be teaching members of the clergy. I can't teach a deacon, I can't teach mother, I can't teach a priest, yeah, unless I have the ordination that is higher than the person I am purporting to teach. So we decided to leave liturgical issues to the College of Cardinals. And so how are we going to ensure that young people know about issues of the church? So we formed the Department of Youth Development to develop spiritualism, to develop life skills, and to train leadership. Those are the kind of development that we can teach. I can teach kids how to live with each other, how to live when you are in the church, how to know about Baba Messias, as the person who started this religious movement. Those we can teach here. So we have set up that department and given it 3 functions, and it will do the work of expanding our spiritual awareness as young people in the church.
I can see you are really articulating your issues coherently and clearly for the viewers to understand.
Yes.
As a teacher, as a scholar, what would happen after listening to how you are articulating this issue? They decide that you can fit in these shoes and say we have to confirm George William as the director of Legio Maria Youth Affairs.
That's a clever question, Eric. It's clever, but here is how I will respond. The Pope, Raphael Titus Otieno Adika, is not my peer. He is an elder of the church. He has Baba Messiah's anointment. And when he called me to request me to hold this ship, I went against everybody's expectation. I was expected and advised to refuse. But you know my father, the late Bishop Samson Ogworongere,
I know him very well.
was a close friend of the Pope. I observed his life and how he served diligently under the Pope, the respect he had for the Pope, and the conversations we had with him. I was not going to be the first person to dishonor my father by dishonoring the Pope. So if the Pope decides that he wants me to stay on for one more day, I will stay on for one more day.
That's good.
Yes, I am not going to open an altercation with the head of the church. I serve at his pleasure. Yes.
Okay, that's a good answer. What are your plans for the Legio Maria Hospital, which was started by the former director? What are your plans to continue with it, or you want to maybe implement your own projects?
So the hospital project is the idea of the first secretariat. Myself, Deacon Juma Awili, Deacon Dan Wasonga, Deacon Musingo, Sister Caroline Okaka, Deacon Moi, and all those people who were very close to Bishop Napoli. The church mission is particularly unique. to do was to create a hospital where we could perform two functions. One, treat the sick, but pray for them as well. So we wanted to build a hospital with a chapel so that the sick who are in the ward could receive mass, daily mass. They could go to the house of Katharina and drink Yadmama, you know, such things. A blended approach to healthcare. And it was a collective vision that we had. Yes. So the exit of Bishop Napoli, and I want to say this for the record. I do not believe that Bishop Napoli's resignation means he has exited from the youth affairs scene. His resignation was as director of youth affairs.
But not as
in
a
my
member.
view. Yes. He did not exit as a member. You do remember he's still the Bishop of Lugari. I know that he still goes to the diocese. He still takes care of his responsibilities. So he has not exited the church or the Directorate of Youth Affairs. He's still fairly a young man. So by virtue of his age, his input in the project is still going to be felt. So going forward, I know we have finished our first phase. Our responsibility now, as we settle on the new secretariat, is to ensure that phase 2 begins. As phase 2 begins, we want phase 1 to be operational, so that we can hire medics, buy equipment, and people start getting treated. Of importance is that the vision remains the same, is that we want to build a level 4 hospital, and that it is going to cost nearly 200 million. There are people who don't believe we can raise that kind of money.
That is an enormous amount of
It
money.
is enormous, but we know that we can raise it. Yes, as long as we are alive and we breathe, we have connections, we have conversations with people who share in our view. I am sure in the next 5 years, we will have completed the project.
Thank you.
Yes.
Now that you've touched on that topic, how is the relationship between you and the former director? How do you relate?
The way I related with the Napera, Bishop Napera, from the time I knew him. So I will take you back a little bit. I am shy, particularly of public church spaces. So I had spent a considerable amount of time away from the public view until Bishop Napoli reached out to me. He's the one who called me and asked me, come, let's work together. I do not think that was in vain. So I deeply appreciate that move. It changed my life in many ways that people cannot understand. And his resignation was deeply painful for many of us who were very close to him, and especially because he did not inform us that he was resigning. So personally, I put a lot of pressure on him to rescind that decision. But he was fully decided that what he had experienced is something that he could not ignore. I fully do not understand what it was he experienced. I had a particular view when he resigned that he should not resign. He should not have resigned in the manner that he resigned. Resignation is normal. Even I could resign. Yeah, but the manner in which the bishop resigned from being director of youth affairs inspired particular bad behavior among the ranks.
It should be a process.
Yes. So the bad behavior that it inspired I am sure that Bishop Napoli did not intend to inspire bad behavior. He's a very decent young man, very, very particular about following the rule of law, and loves Baba Messias deeply. Yeah, but in his moment of anger, he resigned in the manner in which he resigned, and there were very sad conversations that surrounded his resignation that had the potential of breaking the Directorate of Youth Affairs completely, and even the church.
And what could have informed some of his decision?
I have no idea. I reached out, so I have the benefit of having spoken with the bishop. He told me why he resigned. He got upset because of one or two things.
Which he didn't mention.
He did mention. One of them was that we were set to visit Kakamega County
As youth.
as the secretariat. But the Pope was of a different opinion. It found when the church in general, not Legio Maria only, was going through a painful revelation of a cult movement in Shakahola. So the head of the church advised that you cannot go
At the moment.
At the moment,
Maybe later.
Maybe later. But I think there was an altercation behind that conversation, but not involving the bishop and the pope, involving the bishop and some other people around
the pope.
the pope. So he got really upset that he resigned without informing me. Bishop Napoli informed me of every decision he was making before that resignation. Not only me, he informed me, he informed Deacon Bernard, he informed every decision he made. He informed us. But this particular one, we woke up and we found a letter on walls, all walls. And I was like, this is a joke. It must be a joke. This is not him. Yeah, he must have been really upset, which I understand. All of us have our moments when I am fed up. I don't want this kind of thing. Yeah, which is right. So from then, we talk rarely, but we are on email. I inform him of the decisions I have taken, and he supports the decisions I have taken. I believe that he has a future in the leadership of the church, and I encourage all the young people to serve Baba Messias and Baba Messias only.
Allow me not to dwell so much on the resignation of the former director. I want you to touch slightly on this issue of Legio Maria Radio, and then we go to the next topic.
So one of the visions of Bishop Napoli was that we become a church that can be seen and can be heard across the globe. And the way to achieve that, and I fully agree, and all of us who are with him agree with that, is that we set up a radio and a TV station. To do that, we would need to go through that path in either of these two ways. One, buy frequency and set up a formal TV station and radio station that can be heard throughout the country. And in the absence of that, go to the nearest thing, which is to develop an app and have our
Sorry. Done.
Yes. So we do have an app as Legio Maria of African Church Mission that broadcasts
on an online platform.
So if you have a smartphone, you will be able to hear our programs. We are still in the process of finding a stable studio for both the radio and the TV. We are looking at several options. We believe that we are going to be properly guided by the spirit of Baba Messias, so that we take we lay down the radio and the TV station in a place where it's able to thrive. Yes.
Okay. The soonest this can be achieved?
Well, I would say that in the next 1 to 2 months, because it requires substantial amounts of money to set up a studio, as you can see. Yes.
Okay. We have so many people, Legio Maria believers and non-Legio Maria believers, who really love this church and would want to sponsor or donate the little or give the little financial support they may have. But the fear going around is that their funds are normally not used properly. There is lots of corruption in the church. How free from corruption is your office in regards to all these funds?
I find that an answer to that question is absolutely necessary. And I am 100% confident that since the Directorate of Youth Affairs was set up, I have not seen or heard of any corrupt practices in that office.
Correct.
I think we have collected close to 10 million, slightly less, from the time we started buying the diocesan car for Nairobi until now that we have finished phase 1 of the hospital.
The hospital.
We have had the same signatories to our fund account, people we deeply trust, and they have never ever engaged themselves in practices that could jeopardize the safety or the integrity of the funds collected by the youths of Legio Maria of African Church Mission. Every single coin can be accounted for. I can give 100% surety to everyone who has given 1 shilling to our projects that none of it was used for luxury of the officials of the Directorate of Youth Affairs. Yes.
So you can authoritatively say your office is corruption free?
Absolutely. Even the office that we were in, that was led by Bishop Napoli, that was a clean office. 100%. And the reason we really deeply trusted Napoli is that he was absolutely incorruptible.
That's good.
Absolutely. Deacon Napoli, Bishop Napoli, even when he was deacon, Deacon Bernard, and Deacon Wanjia are the signatories to our account. People with impeccable characters. Yes. Anyone who has ever tried to influence them to do anything outside our agreements can give you a report of what they found. Yes.
Is your office independent?
I don't know what that means. You have to help me understand that.
Independent in the sense that you don't act from or on the whims of any external forces, maybe certain cliques of cardinals bishops, or maybe priests, or even Pope?
Oh, well, the office of the Directorate of Youth Affairs serves at the pleasure of the Pope, appointed by the Pope, not in consultation with anyone, and are mandated to operate to the benefit of the church. So as we run our office, we refer to the Pope.
You refer to the Pope?
Yes. We consult him.
Because he's the appointing authority?
Yes. We brief him. Yes. And everything we do for the benefit of the Church of Baba Messias. That is why the question of independence does not arise. Because when we seek independence, then we start to think that we can operate outside the church. No, we can't. We can only operate within the church. Yes, we are not a small church within Legio Maria of African Church Mission.
Church within a church.
No, we are not. What we are a Directorate of Youth Affairs of Legio Maria of African Church Mission. And everything we do must be aligned to the aims and objectives of Legio Maria of African Church Mission that is led by the Pope. So, of course, we have to work very closely with the Pope and the Executive Committee of Legio Maria of African Church Mission. We have to refer to them all the time.
All the time?
Yes, sir.
All the time.
Not only sometimes,
Well,
all the time.
all the
I
time.
assure you, yes.
The rumors has it that youth the youth as a whole, or the youth affairs fraternity, is deeply divided since the former director resigned. I've had complaints from different quarters, or let me treat them as rumors, that there are those supporting you, there are those who still feel that Nyapera was hounded prematurely from the office. You, as the acting director, how do you think, or what, let me put it this way, what are your plans to bring the whole youth together behind you?
So the youth of Legio Maria of African Church Mission are primarily Legion Marias. The first point of contact is Legio Maria of African Church Mission. So if they are divided because of anything, it is largely because they have forgotten about the primary touch point.
Which is the church.
It's Legio Maria of African Church Mission. You can't be divided. As a Legio Maria, you are a Legio Maria. It doesn't matter who leads you. The primary leader of Legio Maria of African Church Mission is Baba Messias. Yeah? And Baba Messias has not vacated his seat. So there is no support for Baba Messias A or Baba Messias B. That's in my view. However, I know that there have been sentiments that would suggest that young people of Legio Maria should follow either George William or Bishop Napoli. That's very wrong advice. No one should follow George William. No one should follow Bishop Napoli. And I can tell you, the Napoli I know would never run that narrative. And anyone who thinks that they are following Bishop Napoli, I'm sure if he meets them, he will tell them to stop following him. Follow Baba Messias. Because Baba Messias is who we are following.
Exactly.
My statement to the young people of Legio Maria is that wherever you are serving, whether you're a deacon, you're a mother, or you're a priest, you are an office holder in any kind of office, serve Baba Messias.
Serve Baba Messias.
To the benefit of Legio Maria of African Church Mission.
Thank you.
Yes.
So my last question that is something I would want to hear from you. How long do you intend to stay on this acting capacity?
Well, I am confident that it is coming towards its end. The purpose in my head for which I was appointed was to hold sheep, steady the sheep, and hand it over to a substantive director of youth affairs. And I'm nearly done with that.
You're nearly done.
Yes. So as soon as I'm done, I will inform the Pope that I have done what he appointed me to do, and I will kindly request him to consider a few names that we will present.
Over 10, how would you rate yourself?
This rating is what is the
on what
the
you've done
criteria
since you took over the ship?
I've been doing steadying generally, so it was nearly sinking. The backlash was terrible.
Can I give you 10 over 10?
No,
Can I give you 10 over 10?
I can't give myself 10 over 10. I have done what is humanly possible. A lot of people expected me to do it faster. I can't. I am not a faster person. I am very slow and calculating. So I would say average. Yes.
Your parting shot.
My parting shot to the Church of Baba Messias is that the young people hold the future of the church, and it doesn't come as a surprise. Each and every church relies on the young people to continue with their tradition. And I want to call upon the young people of Legio Maria of African Church Mission to focus on God and to offer their service strictly to God. Even the members of the Secretariat that I have invited to serve beyond this year, I have invited them to serve God, not to serve me. It's so much so that they know that when I step aside, they should not come up and say that since George William has stepped aside, I am also going to step aside. None of them has been called to serve me. They have been called to serve the Church of Baba Messias. That is my parting shot.
Thank you, viewers. That brings us to the end of this interview today. And thank you so much, George William.
Thank you, Eric, for having me. I deeply appreciate.
Thank you so much
Yes.
for having time for us.
Thank you.
Thank you.